Hello and welcome everyone. And in this video, we are going to discuss lab up and verify the use of an enterprise management tool in the world of Palo Alto Networks that is called the Panorama. So in the whole course, we have heard about Panorama. Now we are going to talk about the same thing in this section. So in this section, I would like to provide you a big picture overview of what it does. And then we will proceed to configure and verify it as we go through this section. When we manage 2 or 3 Palo Alto firewalls, it is not a big deal. We can, directly connect to the firewalls management URL and use the GUI to configure. However, if we have a dozen or more firewalls, it quickly gets complicated and cumbersome to manage all these firewalls by logging in all of these one by one, right? So in this case, we are going to need something more efficient and effective to consistently manage all these firewalls. And here comes the idea behind Panorama. So just imagine that you have a firewall and then it's connected to the cloud, and then somewhere in another DC you have a firewall here, and then you're sitting here on the internet, and you're actually managing the PA1. Now in this case, I'm just having 2 firewalls, but this can go more complex depending on the size of the of the corporate network, right? So in this case, what happens is, so if you want to go and manage the, say, the firewall 1, what you do basically is you just go to uh, the GUI of this firewall 1 and just configure whatever you want to configure. Like, you might have to create an object, you go and create the object, you go and configure the network related settings like the interface, VLANs, virtual routers, or NATing, or maybe you go and configure policies. Now then again, you have to go to this firewall and configure the same thing. So this is like okay when you have small number of devices. Now when you have more devices, then we need a solution called the Panorama, which is another device from the Palo Alto Networks, wherein what it can do is it can centrally you can configure all the objects and the what you have, the object tab, you have the network tab, you have the policies tab, you have the device tab. All those things that are in these tabs, you can centrally configure it on the Panorama, and then from the Panorama you can basically push these changes to the devices which the Panorama is managing. So you are going to push these configs to these devices, to the list of firewalls that the Panorama is managing. For example, the PA1 and PA2 are in the list of firewalls that you are managing. So you here on the individual devices also, you have to specify who is your Panorama, and on the Panorama also you have to add those devices in the managed devices. Yeah, this is basically centralized, and it provides you configuration and logging and role based features as well. So once this is deployed in your organization, then this can also first thing is that with the use of Panorama, you can manage your all your firewalls, whether it's configuring objects, whether it's configuring policies, NAT rules, whether it's configuring the network related settings, virtual routers, VLANs, interfaces, or anything related to a device config, like setting up DNS, setting up host name, or setting up the management interfaces, or setting up the service routes. That is one thing that the Panorama will help you to do. Second is you can now have a centrally logging system, wherein all the logs from the firewalls will be pushed to the Panorama, and then you don't have to individually go and log into your firewalls to check the logs, but here only you can check the logs on your Panorama and it will show all the firewalls, firewall logs here. And also you can implement something called the RBAC, which is role-based administrator control. So here you create admins and give them roles, and then it will be pushed to the devices, and all these admins will be having the level of access that you have granted, right, in the roles. So basically the Panorama acts like a controller. So I mean, this can go bad very quickly if you configure something wrong on the Panorama and then push it to the firewall. So that is a possibility that you are going to mess up everything in real quickly. So that is one thing that you need to be aware of. And Panorama basically can be deployed in 3 modes. So let me clear my drawing. So this can be deployed in 3 modes. The first one is the management only mode, which basically does what it says. So it is used to only manage your firewalls. So you can push all the configs, objects and everything, device configuration, network configuration, everything from the Panorama in this mode. And the second mode that is used is the Panorama mode. Panorama mode, which is called the Panorama mode. And in this mode, what it does is basically it still allows you to manage the firewall. So that feature is there, manage firewalls, it is there. Plus on top of that, you can also make this device to act as a collector, and what Palo Alto refers to this as a log collector. So now that was what I was talking about, that you can collect the logs here, and that would be part of the concept of centrally logging. Yeah, centrally logging. That is the Panorama mode. And then the log collector mode, where the device is deployed only to collect logs, and the M series can be deployed in any of these 3 modes. So there are M series devices in the product line of Palo Alto, which are basically made for the Panorama purpose, and that can be deployed in the what do you say, the management only mode, or Panorama mode, or the log collector mode. Or yeah, the third one is basically the log collector mode. Panorama mode can be working as the management as well as the log collector mode. So you can have, so Panorama mode works as both. In this mode, you can manage the firewall as well as your firewall can work as a log collector mode, or you can have a separate device working as the log collector, which can only collect logs from all the firewalls. Yeah, and that's one thing that I want to talk about. And the other thing is, let me clear my diagram here. Now next, what I want to talk about is the so you now understand, right, that in a device you will have the tabs, which are the object tabs, wherein you can configure the addresses, you can configure the profiles, you can configure certain things here. And then you have the network tab, where you can configure all the interfaces, the virtual routers, the VLANs, etc. And then you have the something called the policies tab, where you can configure the NAT policies, security policies, and then you can also configure the decryption policies, etc. here. And then you have also a tab called the device, where you can configure the device related setting, whether it's a service route, or a DNS, or host name, or management related stuff. So those things can be configured. Now there should be something on the Panorama which actually helps you to configure and push all these things, right? All these things which are mentioned here. And Panorama also is when you go to the Panorama device, it will look like a normal Palo Alto device, but it will have all these tabs. In addition to that, you have a panorama tab, etc., which basically deals with the setup of the Panorama device only. Setup of uh, the device itself. Okay, it's the device itself. So that you need to be aware of. And then when you push all these devices, we basically work with two things inside Panorama to push these configurations. One is called the device group, and the other one is called the device template. So device template would basically consist of the network and the device tab, which is in the firewall. These two tabs and the underlying all the settings, and the device group will be used to push the objects, configure these objects and the policies centrally, and then push them to the managed devices. So in the next videos, I will walk you through all these configurations, how to create the object group, how to create the device templates. So basically, first of all, we will need the Panorama device itself. So I will be focusing on the management mode only, where I'll be using the Panorama to manage our firewalls, and we will be basically using a VM which I'll be installing inside our ESXi, and then I will have my Palo Alto, which is inside my VMware workstation, and both of them I will have a licensed one, because you should have the licensed version to work on this lab. And the number of device that Panorama can basically manage depends on multiple factors. One is the type of Panorama that you're using. It can be physical, it can be a VM, virtualized Panorama, and also the license that you are having. So you need to purchase the license. As far as I remember, the minimum license is basically I think 25 devices, but yeah, so starts from 25 devices minimum, and then you can go up and have more devices added to your, based on the license you have to purchase from um, from Palo Alto, right? And then in the virtual machines, it supports multiple platforms, right? Like I said, ESXi, KVM, and the Hyper-V, etc. And also it can be deployed on multiple cloud providers like GCP, Google, the Microsoft Azure, and AWS. So in the next video, I'll go through the installation process, and then we will see how to manage the firewalls using Panorama.